Hello and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Today we're going to talk about, gang threats. We've got some interesting things that have happened the last couple of days. We had the terrible Florida school shooting. And when these sorts of things happen, and there's been school shootings a lot of places, there's bank robberies, there's lots of domestic killings, but it's when the politicians are ready with a prepared speech and legislation, I start to suspect this is a setup. It's a false flag. Someone's controlled, and you can't say, well, because they've done such a poor job executing this, that it couldn't have been the government. Well, in all truth, every false flag event that truthers have exposed demonstrate that the government is pretty shoddy about it. Starting with the fellow that shot up the movie theater, Sandy Hook, Boston bombing. They do a very poor job. Anyways, we've got this fella, Nicholas Cruz, out of Florida. 19-year-old, expelled from school. Seems like a perfect candidate, right, for some mind control activity. Now, first I have to say, well, the press, the dutiful press, the mainstream media, they really haven't done what I like to call a good job. They've tried saying that, well, he's a white supremacist. Well, if that's the case, why didn't he go shoot up a black school or a Hispanic school or an Asian school? Right? He shot up a bunch of white kids, and this is terrible, right? More shootings. People are traumatized. So I don't think he's really a white supremacist if he's shooting up white people. Right? It sounds more like he's anti-white, anti-establishment, anti-whatever that these bad guys think of the regular Joe American six-pack community. Anyways, this Nicholas Cruz fella, 17 people are killed, right? So what has happened? Politicians have run to the cameras. And they don't always do this. There's school shootings all the time. And people don't run to the cameras. It's only when there's a pre-approved, pre-planned political agenda behind it. So they came right out. And if I remember the news stories right, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were talking about banning AR-15s before the freaking event was even done. They just assumed or somehow knew that it was an AR-15, right? What is the deal with this? Well, it falls in line with the typical false flag political agenda crap. Right? And even if this wasn't a false flag political agenda piece of crap, we've got some serious issues as Americans and as preppers to contend with. Right? My thing is this kid wasn't a kid, right? He's 19 years old. Now, first off, I want to say he went into a gun-free zone, right? Schools are gun-free zones, and so the law there didn't stop him. Right? Apparently, criminals don't obey the law. So by outlawing certain types of guns, you're not going to stop criminal activity. They're going to just find different ways to do the same things. But this Nicholas Cruz guy, he seems a bit unstable. I guess he had deaths in his family. But he's also doing some pretty radical things. And people go, well, John, you do radical stuff. You talk about shit hitting the fan. Right, you're a gun guy. You're pretty radical. Well, my whole life I've had guns, and I've never managed to shoot up a school, a bank, a business, a building. I've never shot up the government, right? Because I'm not crazy. Preppers aren't crazy. We're just concerned about the state of affairs. But these radicalized young people, they, if you want to call them crazy, they're very crazy. So this Nicholas Cruz guy, what was he wearing? We've got a picture. There's pictures of him wearing a shirt. T-shirt with communist symbology on it. Communist, depictions of communist leaders. You don't wear that sort of thing. Right? Unless it's a parody and you're making a joke. But then it should be pretty apparent, right? That you just like to make jokes. People would say, oh, that guy, he's a crazy jokester. He hated communists. Well, what else do we know about Nicholas Cruz? He posed in pictures. One time he wore a Make America Great Again, a MAGA hat. but his face was covered, very typical of the Antifa movement. And there's other pictures of him where he's posing in Antifa-style poses, covered face, covered head, right? My thing is, these people, by dressing like that, these Antifa guys are dressing and behaving like terrorists. The terrorists, not terrorists, the communists, what did they do? Well, they came out, they hid their identity as best they could, and they used violent political violence to commit revolution, to overthrow, topple government. And it didn't happen in one day. It took years and years of practice and building up resentment and hate for the current system. And also it takes years and years of indoctrination to bring people along to believe something as destructive as communism, to teach it as if it's good. Right? So that's what's going on in our colleges right now. And as preppers, as Americans, as patriots, as truthers, as taxpayers, we need to understand that colleges are being utilized as incubators for degenerate minds. Take that one to the bank. So, this Nicholas Cruz guy, he supported Antifa, in the very least through his behavior. He appears to be communist by emulating communist behavior, and he's also committed political violence. Political violence is domestic or homegrown terrorism, but it's one step above that. See, terrorism is designed to kill people and just scare people for political purposes. A lot of these Antifa types are going out and with political motivation directed at anybody who is against them. Right? And they'll call them fascist, and they believe that fascism is a form of psychological aggression against them. And merely calling someone else a fascist is a pronouncement of I've been assaulted and now I need to protect myself and assault someone else. Right? They're allowed to physically assault in response to a psychological assault on them, which is their dislike for fascism. It is a radical form of what I like to call mental retardation. Now, I caught some Antifa activity over the last weekend up in Washington, the Seattle area. The Antifa people were out there marching, and once again, people went out to oppose them. And up there, it was a group called the Proud Boys. And they didn't, Proud Boys kind of reminds you of white pride. They were white. Some guys looked like they were Hispanic, but they didn't look like typical neo-Nazi skinhead types, right? I've seen those guys. I've seen them up close, right? They're pretty scary. They're pretty serious about their business. These Proud Boys, I think, just have had it. But I'm not here to defend them. I'm just talking about the conflict. So during these conflicts, the arguments and discussions, I started listening more to these Antifa people talk. And when they talk, they don't talk like you and I, conversationally. Hey, this is what I think about that. I saw that. These are things going. You can see in their eye, and then there's speech patterns. They start to recite things that they've been taught. And they recite it. It does not sound like their voice because they go into a recitation of some indoctrinated spiel. And if they don't like you, they'll just shout you down. Fascist, 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 call you names, which is an ad hominem attack. It's not them talking. It's this thing that's been put in them. Right? They've been programmed, in other words. And when we talk about people who have been psychotic mass murderers or binge killers, whatever name you want to assign to them, they all seem like they're mind control victims. Like they've been brainwashed, they've been indoctrinated, and then something is implanted in them. They've been psychologically controlled, and then they're triggered, and they take actions that are incredibly violent. And it could be that this Nicholas Cruz was one more example of that. But this isn't the first time we've had an Antifa shooting like this. We had, down in Texas, the church shooting. That person went there to kill a lot of people, and if it wasn't for some other brave Americans, more would have died. But that killing there was supposed to be in response to Trump. Once again, we have this very close association with the hatred for Trump absolute hatred for Trump and the attack on others that they claim support him. As preppers, that doesn't make us Trump supporters. It makes us freedom supporters, right? Individuals that are strong, right? But Trump's doing good things. We'll support him doing good things. It's important to know that these wackos, these Antifa communist types, they're going to come out, and probably in greater and greater numbers as the year gets warmer, as we move into spring. What are they doing? They're anti-fascist, they claim. Antifa. They're anti-Trump. They like to mock people, right? With the MAGA, the Make America Great Again slogan. They use violence, and they are very, very weak-minded. So this idea that we need to get rid of guns in order to clean up the system, that's not the problem. Guns is your protection. Guns is my protection. It is my right. It's not a privilege. And because communists and other political subversives would choose to use that particular tool as a means to accomplish their political end, that doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, negate or destroy my right. Right? Their choice to be a criminal should not result in you losing your rights. What we need to do is understand crime. When it happens, punish it, deter it where you can, investigate it before it happens if it makes sense. So that's when I move on to this. I listen to politicians whining and crying like babies. One was a congressman saying, well, what are you doing about my children? We have my children, this and that. I'm thinking, you're a congressman in D.C. I bet your kids are in a private school. Probably with security fences and armed guards. Get out of my face. Another was this jackass on TV who started crying and breaking down. What he's doing is trying to emotionally appeal to people. He's trying to emotionally appeal to people by crying on camera and demanding we do something about guns. Here's what I have to say. Antifa has demonstrated at least two serial or mass murder gun events. At every single rally and protest, they are violent. They try and hide their identity with masks, so that makes them readily identifiable. If the communist flags and chanting of ridiculous moronic slogans doesn't give them away. Are they a membership group where they're a card-carrying Antifa? Card-carrying commies? Well, if that's the case, according to anti-secret society rules, membership in any group has to be disclosed. It has to be kept and logged and provided. They cannot keep their membership secret if it's a real organization. And if it's a loose-knit, word-of-mouth organization, then police should be able to infiltrate it, find out who its members are, create lists, and go and arrest them. They should be able to arrest them at events, not for free speech, but for political sedition and the promotion of violence. There has been now enough undercover footage of school professors, older people, like in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, and what they do is they recruit these young people and they go into a brainwashing scheme with them. They're taught about communism in school, in college, that it's good. And they seem to have forgotten around 100 million people have been killed in the name of communism. Makes Hitler seem like just your run-of-the-mill psychopath. These communists are off the charts. But what we need to realize is we've got some huge problems coming in America. As preppers, you and I need to understand that the political turmoil here can get out of hand really fast, especially if it's fueled by war in Syria or maybe war in North Korea. That political Antifa hysteria can be fueled by an interruption of infrastructure, services, and products like fuel, electricity, right? Our road system can be screwed up, right? How? Lots of different ways, right? They can do their roadblocks, or they can set off bombs. They can screw up bridges and tunnels, either directly or with cyber attacks. These Antifa people can be fueled by a stock market crash. They can take advantage of the crash while everyone's confused, upset, lost their money, and they can start with their political violence, which is domestic terrorism. Our government, the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, they need to get off of their ass, compile lists of Antifa, and they need to go round them up, arrest them. And if they match the profiles of any of these people that have promoted or caused violence to happen, right? If it's happened, they need to arrest them. They need to make an example of these criminals before they become mass murdering criminals. And they also need to say this group is politically subversive. It is holding meetings talking about using violence to get their communist revolution started. We don't need to let them get so big and proliferate so widely through the collegiate system, through the grade school or high school system. We don't need it so widely proliferated that it's uncontrollable. Now I want to talk about Greece, the nation of Greece. Back when they had their financial collapse several years ago, the banks came out with this wonderful system, and it sounded really cool. It was called austerity. So their system collapsed economically. The banks shut down. They put capital controls, which is another cool sounding slogan. Capital controls means you can't get into the bank to get your own money out. They're only going to let you take out a tiny amount on a usual or regular basis. You can barely take care of your bills, but what you can't do is pull your money out of the system and escape. So they put on capital controls in Greece. Business couldn't be conducted. They put austerity on the people, saying, hey, guess what? The money that you do have, we're going to tax you more and give you fewer entitlements, fewer benefits. It's called austerity. What ended up happening is youth unemployment went through the roof. Why is that? Because businesses, in order to stay open, had to streamline their employee roles, their employment roles, their number of employees. How's that? They had to streamline that. Who do you keep? You keep your best, most experienced workers. That means not the youth. So the youth unemployment in Greece during their collapse went through the roof. I believe it was over 50%. That's a lot of unemployed youth. I can't remember what the age for youth meant. 25 years of age or younger? I think that was it, but correct me if I'm wrong. So, here in America, imagine an economic collapse. Capital controls in place. We're at war in some other country. There's austerity measures imposed on the American people to punish us for being such bad spenders of money and creators of national debt. Even though that's the politicians' fault in Washington, we need to punish the people. So corporations, in order to keep their doors open the best they can, stop hiring people. They lay people off. So who do they keep? Well, for lower wages, but they'll still keep them. Their most experienced, best workers. Who does that leave unemployed? The youth. What do youth do? They get fucking pissed off. What youth are out there right now that are fucking pissed off, that are politically subversive, domestic terrorist behaving, communist loving little pricks? That's right, Antifa. If we have a major economic slowdown, Antifa's numbers will swell. And I hate to say this, but these youth today, these 20-year-old, 22-year-olds, and I'm not talking about the intelligent ones, I'm talking about the dumbasses and the poor kids who have gotten a terrible education. No Child Left Behind my ass. Common Core, rotten to the core. These youth cannot think for themselves. They don't have an understanding and a grasp of the history of their own nation, the American Revolution and why it was fought, an understanding of the Constitution and the need for our Bill of Rights, and their rights, duties, and obligations as citizens of the United States does not include overthrowing your government and implementing communism. But that's what they promote, that's what they teach, that's what they want. If we have a shutdown, folks, it doesn't have to be all out shit hits the fan craziness. It doesn't have to be Mad Max times Caveman or Captain Caveman. It doesn't need to be that. We just need to have a lot of instability and turmoil. And these Antifa groups, and maybe there's more groups like it. Maybe there's more underground shit that's going to boil up. What we need to understand, though, is that you have to protect yourselves. And once again, there's the difference between a entire world shit it's the fan scenario or regional, geographically regional areas, or just hot spots. This city here, that city there, the city down here in the south, one out west. We could get shit it's the fan hot spots caused by these little terrorists. Now, if I did anything remotely close to being a terrorist, if I step over the line, right? If John steps over the law 1 inch, you can bet your ass they would arrest me. Right? But I have a track record. I have a history of never resorting to violence to try and get my way. Right? I'm unhappy with the system, but violence is not the solution. Right? Communism is not the solution. But it seems like this is a direction that the left, the political left, wants. I believe that ex-CIA director Brenner, who now works for CNN, is not only a communist, but allegedly also a converted Muslim. And it's not, I think he was converted in an area where the Wahhabi, which are some of the most violent pricks, are. And that's what he converted to, is Wahhabi Muslim. But I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're in big trouble, folks. We're in big, big trouble. Not at this very second, but at this very second. You see, it's like a pot with the lid on it, and the water is heating up, and eventually it's going to get to boiling, and it's just going to boil over and blow the lid off. That's what we're facing here in America. Right now, everything seems normal, but the water that's cooking us is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I don't know if the water is going to overheat and that causes shit hits the fan, or if shit hitting the fan blows the lid off and then the water comes out with it. Either way, you and I need to be ready with food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Not political offense like a little terrorist, like a communist, like an Antifa member, but self-defense. That is all of our God-given right. To defend our lives and those we love when threatened, right, with great bodily harm, injury, and death. We need to protect ourselves. We need to be prepared, and we need to have a plan. So understand Antifa, understand communism, understand where we're at today, because chance favors the prepared mind. Is yours. Next time we talk, it'll be the weekly wrap-up. Interesting stuff I got for you. I'll talk to you then.